Hi there, everybody. This is John Parulis. I'm going to flip out of the... I'm sitting in my car. Is this any better?
Yeah, it sounds a lot better.
Okay, then I'll just have to do the interview standing outside. I hope it doesn't rain.
I hope it doesn't too. Okay, I think the storm that's coming... John and I are both in California, and there's a big cold winter storm coming. It's expected to snow down to sea level here along the coast, which is highly unusual, but it's a few hours off, I think. So that was a little premature introduction of our guest, John Parulis, who's a veteran activist, radical activist, and today he's going to share his experiences and analyses that he's developed about movement infiltration over the years. And he's got a lot of historical depth and, a lot of examples to bring forward for us. Before we get started, I want to tell people about the show page. It's today's show. There is a show page posted at the Resistance Radio Forum. That's at resistradio.com/forum. And then you can click on the link that says John Parulis on movement infiltration. And I've placed a link to that show page in the chat room for the folks who are there. Okay, so let me tell you a little bit about John. He's, like I said, he has a history of radical activism going back decades. He worked with Greenpeace in the Rainbow Warrior campaign against the French government's program of testing nuclear weapons in the South Pacific, which was very, very destructive to the oceans and to the human population in that area. A very important campaign, and one which resulted in a murderous attack by the French Secret Service against the Rainbow Warrior, and this led to the death of a friend of John's, Fernando Pereira. John's going to tell us about this. In more recent years, John's been very active in the 9/11 Truth movement, and he was the creator of the famous Truth Burn art installation at the 2007 Burning Man happening in Nevada. And John has been deeply involved in building architects and engineers for 9/11 Truth into a strong organization, and he has seen things in that organization that disturbed him and raised infiltration issues, which he wants to discuss. And then most recently, both John and I have observed activities at one of the more high-profile 9/11 sites, 911blogger.com, that have raised serious concerns for both of us about the possibility of infiltration there. And we're going to go into this in detail. It's a very important issue. We need to explore it in depth. So, John, I thought what we could do would be to start with your experiences with the Rainbow Warrior. And I gave a little bit of an intro, but what did you learn in that amazing experience you had there?
Well, that happened in 1985. My career with Greenpeace, which was a part-time one, started in 1981. And I, like so many people, young people that go into these things, are, to use the expression, bright-eyed and bushy-tailed. I mean, we're idealistic. And by the way, I still carry that idealism. It's been tempered by years, decades of experience. But, I think that's a good attitude going into this thing. And, oftentimes we as activists don't stop to consider that there are people with serious and even murderous agendas out there that want to suppress us and put us down, and in some cases even kill us. And that's what they did in 1985. Greenpeace was in that year using the Rainbow Warrior as its flagship in what was called the Pacific Peace Voyage. A few months before the boat was bombed, we rescued Marshall Islanders who were on an island that was 100 miles downwind of Bikini Atoll. Now, most of the fallout of Bikini, which was one of the largest thermonuclear blasts ever conducted in the Pacific, most of that fallout fell on the Marshallese. And even decades later, their island was still contaminated, though the government had scooped off the first foot of soil on the island. We helped move this entire island population to a safer island 200 miles away. where there wasn't radioactive contamination. The Rainbow Warrior was then to proceed south to New Zealand and assist the Mururoa Atoll activists in trying to stop French underground nuclear testing in that really rich marine environment. And the Rainbow Warrior was going to be the mothership supplying all these other smaller boats in the flotilla with supplies and food and water and that sort of thing. It was infiltrated at first by a young woman posing as a bright-eyed, bushy-tailed activist, and she fooled everyone in the New Zealand office and was supplying tactical data to some really thuggish operatives in the French DGSE. That's their version of the CIA. When the Rainbow Warrior came to Auckland, New Zealand, I believe it was in July of 1985, French Secret Service agents swam out to the boat with rebreather scuba gear so you couldn't detect bubbles or where they were. They put 2 limpet mines on the boat. Those limpet mines blew a huge hole in the engine room and right underneath the shaft where Fernando and I had bunked. Now, I had left the boat a month earlier because my commitment with Greenpeace was up at that time, and I had a young family, a young baby and a wife, and I had to get back to them. But I carried Fernando's last letters to his daughters. This was a 1985. Email wasn't that big in that year, and we still did snail mail. And so, the press came to me after the boat was bombed, and they interviewed me, and they asked me who I thought did it. And I said, well, I mean, look at the French. I mean, we were interfering with their nuclear testing there. Investigate them. And, as it turns out, it was a French conspiracy. It was a bona fide conspiracy that excellent New Zealand police work uncovered. It toppled the French government. The Minister of Defense had to resign. It was a huge scandal. The French government had to pay Fernando's family millions. They paid Greenpeace millions, and that was the way that played out.
Well, that's an amazing experience. So that certainly establishes the murderous potential of state agent infiltration. The state, when states are trying to stop the activities of activists who are opposed to state policies but acting legally, the states don't limit themselves to legal actions. History has proven that they repeatedly engage in illegal and often murderous acts. Absolutely. And yesterday I was listening to Pacifica Radio, and there was a documentary about how the COINTEL program of J. Edgar Hoover and the FBI was discovered, and it was accidental. It was activists who had broken into some facility and accidentally came upon these materials. And the COINTEL information uncovered a vast and expansive and detailed operation by the FBI to infiltrate groups and cause divisiveness. That was one of the stated objectives of the COINTEL program, to cause divisiveness. And they find people who look like activists, who sound like activists. These are what I would call viruses. They inject them into our good-hearted organizations and start causing disruptive activity to happen. In some cases, murder and death. Exactly. Some cases did result in murders. And then we know also from William Pepper's experience, which I think you're familiar with, that...
sure. Yeah.
Why don't you describe William Pepper's... he's come out and spoken about agent infiltration in radical movements, and he explicitly spoke with 9/11 Truth activists at a conference and warned them about this possibility. What did he have to say?
Well, I will encapsulate it in a nutshell, but there's an excellent MP3 of my friend Michael Woolsey from Visibility 9/11 interviewing William Pepper about this very thing. And basically, Pepper was a friend of the King family, and he knew Martin Luther King. And he hung out with those activists in the civil rights movement, and he has relayed stories about how they were infiltrated by agents who used a heavy-handed approach. They actually threatened King's life at one point, and I mean, it's no secret now. The FBI had gone into King's personal life and uncovered all kinds of potentially embarrassing things, as a direct campaign. Governments do this all the time. I think you just pointed that out, Todd. Intelligence operations and various types of spy activities. I mean, this is nothing new. This is a feature of government, especially when governments need to project power in the world. The component of spying, of infiltration, is a bona fide necessity to them. They can't live without it. And we as activists should not be naive about this. If you look at the gravity of the crime of the century, which is the destruction of the World Trade Centers and all the resulting wars and misery that have resulted from that it tops anything that I can think of, maybe going all the way back to World War II and the Holocaust and the Japanese atrocities and America's dropping an atom bomb on innocent people and vaporizing 60,000 in less than a second. This is the greatest crime since then. And
yeah, I agree with you.
You could bet your boots that the perpetrators of the 9/11 crime are still in place. They are still active, and to launch a campaign like that with such a high degree of sophistication, that infiltration had to be on the drawing board from day one in their planning, that you don't do something like this and just wait for the cards to fall where they may. You have a very sophisticated management plan that is thought out well in advance of an operation like this. And infiltration and undermining groups that want to uncover the truth are dead center bullseye on their target of who to infiltrate. And
so that suggests that perhaps these infiltration efforts began very early after 9/11, and sure. some people have talked about that. Recently, David Ray Griffin published a book called Cognitive Infiltration that was an analysis of a high government official who's publicly called for just such infiltration operations, and specifically of the 9/11 Truth Movement. This is the fellow Cass Sunstein, who's a friend of Obama's and works in the White House. And in an article published in a journal, he called for what he calls cognitive infiltration. This was his distinctive tactic, he called it, for breaking up the hard core of extremists who supply conspiracy theories. And he defined cognitive infiltration in this manner. He says, cognitive infiltration of extremist groups whereby government agents or their allies, acting either virtually or in real space, and either openly or anonymously, will undermine what he calls the crippled epistemology of believers. He uses a lot of rhetoric by planting doubts about the theories and stylized facts that circulate within such groups, thereby introducing beneficial cognitive diversity. And Griffin then goes on to analyze this passage from Sunstein's article. He says, on the basis of past experiences, it can be anticipated that this harmless-sounding cognitive diversity would have effects that would be anything but harmless. It would produce antagonisms, fights, broken friendships, and divisions, perhaps even the complete disbanding of the groups. And then he goes on and shows how Sunstein repeatedly talks about breaking up these groups. He uses the language of breaking up repeatedly. So here we actually have, an explicit publication by a high government official of the current government. And when I first read this analysis of David Ray Griffin's, one of my reactions was, well, gosh, isn't there plenty of evidence that there's been infiltration prior to this publication and to this call, and that actually, maybe one of the purposes behind this was that it seemed like the government was still just considering the possibility. I think it's highly likely that it's been going on for a while. Now, you've had some experiences at Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth, I believe, that raised some issues for you.
Yeah, this is a very difficult topic, and I am not going to talk about the topic in great detail other than to say that about a year ago, we in Architects and Engineers in 9/11 Truth probably experienced something that either was an infiltration or certainly had all the characteristics of an infiltration. Due to sloppy vetting procedures, 2 individuals were allowed into the group, and 1 became a board member of Architects and Engineers. And this guy started floating ideas out about changing the emphasis of our mission away from controlled demolition into something he called engineered destruction. So it was a semantic shift, but a very important one, because words have power, and AE 9/11 Truth was founded on the very strong evidence of controlled demolition in the 3 World Trade Towers. That's a theme that Richard Gage harps on constantly and continuously. And then he had an associate in there, and they started attacking the authors of the nanothermite paper. So, in fact, at one point, calling them amateur investigators. Imagine calling Stephen Jones and Niels Harrit amateur investigators, and this was coming right out of Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Well, after what I would describe as a severe internal struggle, those 2 individuals were dismissed, and some of us left the organization, both voluntarily and involuntarily, and I'm one of those that left the organization, although I just want to say that I still bear a lot of respect for Richard Gage and the organization. They are on the forefront of 9/11 Truth. They're doing important work there. I'm not privy to the details of how things are going there. I just hope that our group that staged a kind of rebellion at that time made an impression on Architects and Engineers. I hope they are more vigilant now. I hope they are or did improve their vetting procedures, which were full of holes in allowing people like the 2 individuals that came in a year ago to start sowing discord and dissension among the ranks.
Yeah, and I think that's your concerns seem very reasonable. To have this focus, this campaign of shift of focus away from the strongest evidence, the strongest exponents, to denigrate the credentials and the standing of people like Stephen Jones and Niels Harrit. These are really outrageous, and they're so outrageous that they need to make one suspicious, because no one with good intentions in the movement, no genuine member of the movement would take an approach like that, it would seem. So I think vetting is a really important term that you used, and you used this term again more recently in your in your response to a shocking publication that went up at 911blogger.com a couple of weeks ago, I guess it is now. And this issue of vetting was raised for you by not only the article itself, but the thread of comments below the article, many of which were very, very extreme in their denigration of David Ray Griffin. And of course,
yes, I agree. I agree.
Yeah, and that was part of your response, was that you were disturbed by that, as was I. People here at Resistance Radio know that I've been associated with David Ray Griffin, and so that I'm definitely in his camp, and I'm proud to be. And to see the kind of comments that were made and not just in the comment thread, but in the article itself, which I'm going to mention here in a second, really was quite disturbing, and it was the intensity and the shocking nature of it, similar to what you described there at Architects and Engineers for 9/11 Truth. Well, so a couple of weeks ago, a man by the name of Eric Larson posted an article at 9/11 Blogger, and this is what John and I would like to spend quite a bit of the rest of the hour today talking about. He posted an article called Critique of David Ray Griffin's 9/11 Fake Calls Theory by Eric Larson. This was a very long article, and from my standpoint, it doesn't have much substance other than its shocking nature, but this will have to be demonstrated over time. And an important thing here is that this man, Eric Larson, is not just someone who has posted there, but he's actually a moderator at 9/11 Blogger. 9/11 Blogger has a set of moderators. I'm not sure of the exact number, 5 or 6, I believe. And I believe what they do is they collectively decide what things can be posted at their site. And I know that there's certain what seem like arbitrary quality there, what gets posted and what doesn't. I've had things not be posted. One thing that I posted didn't go up because the moderators didn't like the idea of me interviewing Kevin Barrett, so they didn't post my show announcement for my Kevin Barrett show. So you can see it's somewhat heavy-handed. In this case, the moderator himself posts his own article, and none of the other moderators evidently was able to object or objected to it. And then this, I noticed that not a single of the other moderators, whose names I won't bother to mention, but not a single one of the other moderators in the comment thread below made any kind of critical comment about the article. And one of the moderators made several very positive comments about not only the article itself, but the shocking thread, and specifically the most shocking elements of the thread. So it seemed like it was pretty much a collective decision by the moderators. The unanimity on the part of the moderators stood out for me. Now, I realize I'm talking quite a lot here. Maybe it'd be better if I just let you talk about your take on it now, John.
Right. Well, having experienced either the effect of what looked like an infiltration or an actual infiltration at AE 9/11 Truth, oddly enough, a year ago about this time, I started looking at that thread and seeing similarities between what happened at AE 9/11 Truth and what's going on in that thread. And the first thing that stood out for me was the disrespectful tone taken by some of the posters, anonymous posters with, avatar handles,
right,
referring to David Ray Griffin's research as BS, a little bit stronger language in some cases. Someone also posted that most of the books were worthless, that maybe 1 or 2 of David Ray Griffin's books were worth reading. Now imagine 4 years ago seeing that kind of post on Blogger. That person would have been driven off in a heartbeat. And right. I think it's a barometer of what's going on at 9/11 Blogger, that kind of hateful posting about one of the premier researchers of 9/11 Truth. In fact, the man who is personally responsible for turning Richard Gage onto 9/11 Truth, David Ray Griffin, would be so abused in this thread. Now, I did break the rules of 9/11 Blogger. I named names, and I called out some of the people that were making these types of posts, and I asked them to be accountable for the past 10 or 20 years of their lives. That's one thing that I ran into as a roadblock with one of the people I mentioned at the AE 9/11 Truth controversy. I talked to this guy on the phone and I said, I've been looking for you on the internet. I can't see anything. I said, why don't you tell me about yourself? What's your educational background? Where have you spent the past 10 or 15 years of your life? And he said, I'm not talking about that. And he ended the conversation, and that was that. And I think that's a partial giveaway if someone wants to cloak their past, that means they've got something to hide. And I was derided. I was called names like a snitch jacketer, things like that on the blogger thread. And
right.
I tried to write personal emails to one of the moderators that I know, who's also was a board member at AE 9/11 Truth at the time. So he knows a lot about what I'm talking about, and I was trying to create an awareness in him about this problem that what I saw happening to David Ray Griffin. I hate to use a crass expression, but it looked like a gangbang. I think there were some legitimate concerns about the fake phone call study of Dr. Griffin. I think that's not one of his strong points. I think perhaps there are some problems with the analysis, but one of the things that we had decided in the AE 9/11 Truth internal conflict we had a year ago was to keep our problem in-house and not discuss it in public or let it go out there. And I had urged the moderators of Blogger to do the same with David Ray Griffin, extend the same courtesy, professional courtesy that we had extended to Richard Gage to keep our disagreements in-house. But to air it like this in an open forum and attack David Ray Griffin's intentions, his intentions were attacked. I was happy to see Kevin Ryan come out in defense of Dr. Griffin. He referred to many of the points in Eric Larson's piece as suppositions.
Yes,
he cited the use of the word may many times. I think there's Eric Larson uses the word may maybe perhaps a dozen times, 10 to 12 times. And at the end of his criticism of the criticism, Kevin Ryan says that it wasn't a convincing enough rebuttal. Now, the other thing that's telling, and listen carefully, David Ray Griffin put out a post on 9/11 Blogger about his illness and the closeness to death that he came. I looked through that thread recently, and I didn't see any words of sympathy from any of these bloggers who were at 9/11 Blogger who were attacking him, and I think that says something. Also, the timing of this article is very interesting. We're approaching the 10-year anniversary of 9/11, and what are we doing at Blogger? We're chipping away at the edges. We're chipping away at our weakest evidence rather than focusing on the three buildings where we have our strongest case to make. And we're attacking the premier researcher. And knowing that he's down, knowing that he's in a state of recovery right now, and not able to give his usual 100% rebuttal to this, I think all of these things taken together call into question the wisdom of those that are guiding 9/11 Blogger. And even though I've been put on moderation, I am personally boycotting 9/11 Blogger because of this. I don't think it's a wise policy to allow that type of criticism, that kind of high visibility, especially for people coming into this movement. Many people come into this movement because of David Ray Griffin's research in his books. Imagine coming into a premier 9/11 blog like 9/11 Blogger and seeing him trashed like that. There was some good criticism in the piece. I don't want to try to characterize it as a total trash piece because it was not. But what concerns me about that piece is the personal attack and the attempt to dethrone our prime researcher for 9/11. And this was exactly what these two individuals that infected AE 9/11 Truth were trying to do. They were trying to attack the foremost researchers in the movement, Stephen Jones and Neil Harrod, and the whole premise of controlled demolition, trying to steer the focus away from that into this weird phrase of engineered destruction. What the heck does engineered destruction mean to anyone? It's a diversionary tactic. It's meant to cause divisiveness, and that's what it did. it fragmented AE 9/11 Truth at a very critical time in its history, going into the 1,000-member celebration and news conference. This is when that all hit the fan, and I believe it had a good outcome. You know, but I noted too many similarities between what was happening then and what's happening now on 9/11 Blogger.
I recall that you specifically raised the issue of the vetting of the moderators, I believe it was, at 9/11 Blogger in your comments, which were then expunged from the record. And you say you've been put on moderation. That means your comments on that thread were all deleted. No one can read them. They're not just hidden by a link. They're gone. And you're not allowed. And you're not allowed to post under normal conditions, although all posts at 9/11 Blogger are subject to extraordinarily stringent moderation. For example, if you post something at Blogger and it's deemed by the moderators to be adequate, it gets posted either on the blog page or sometimes on what's called the home page, where it gets more visibility. But then if you need to make even the slightest, I realize this is a side issue, but it's just an indication of the absolute 100% control that the moderators have over the site, with the exception of comments, but I'll get into that in a second as well. If you make the slightest edit to your original post, it goes through a moderation process all over again. So 24 hours can go by before this very slight edit, maybe correcting a number or a misspelled word. It goes back into moderation and has to be reapproved through a very time-consuming and laborious process. And then as far as comments go, they've got this voting system, which is really, really strange, voting up or voting down on comments. And this allows factions and cliques to control the visibility of comments that have been posted. And the numbers that are used are simply the difference between votes up and votes down, so you have no indication of the absolute numbers. And so if the difference between upvotes and downvotes is sufficient, if it goes to -5 or something, the comment disappears behind a link. Now, it could be that the voting was 157 to 152, but it went to -5, and so it disappears. It's a completely tendentious thing that allows a small clique to control the appearance of comments. And if you look at the thread on the Eric Larson piece, you'll see that the comments that have been blocked, and so that you can't read them without clicking on an extra link, are all ones that are criticizing the posting and the other comments and the terrible extreme nature of comments.
Exactly. I think what that reveals is there's an imbalance somewhere at 9/11 Blogger. My friend Chris Sarnes, who was very instrumental in helping gain high-level activists gain a better awareness of the errors in the NIST analysis of the collapse of Building 7. He's just voted down. I think Chris is on moderation too. And get this, even Kevin Ryan was voted down. So, come on, give me a break. Kevin Ryan getting voted down at 9/11 Blogger. I mean, that and his critique of the critique was entirely reasonable. I read it in great detail, and I think he made some great points there. And to get that voted down, I mean, give me a break. I think the voting system, as you say, Todd, is flawed. I think that should either be retained as an internal measure of some sort for the moderators, but not allowed to escape into the regular blogger community. 9/11 Blogger can be rescued, I believe. I don't think it's a lost cause. I think it is undergoing a serious course correction right now, and it has an option to do the right thing or to just allow itself to be infected as it is by, for certain, negative and unhelpful critiques. The premier site for 9/11 information is 911truth.org. It's been around the longest. a lot of the posts from 9/11 Blogger end up on 9/11truth.org, and I was happy that they didn't feature this Eric Larson piece in their main section. They do provide a link to the Eric Larson article in a sublink off to the side in a sidebar navigation, but not in the main page. So I think that has to tell you something about Janice Matthews or the people that are guiding 9/11truth.org. That they would not publish the Eric Larson piece front and center as it.
Right. It doesn't meet the standards.
Yeah. So anybody wants to question Janice Matthews on that, go ahead. I'm sure there are other folks running 9/11truth.org. And just to shout out to my friends who had problems with David Ray Griffin's analysis of the phone calls. I respect a lot of these people. Some of them are personal friends of mine, and we've been over this on the phone since this thing erupted. I think their criticisms and their concerns are valid. I don't think the way this critique was conducted was in the best interest of the truth movement. And I don't think that the analysis qualifies anything close to what I would call a bona fide peer review. To allow the kind of adolescent invective that you see on social networks to sprout its ugly little head, its pimply little head. I'm sorry, I guess I'm getting colorful here because you know where I'm standing. In our blog, about the most serious crime in the 21st century certainly, has no place. And I think it's time to do some serious self-study at 9/11 Blogger and bring the truth movement, back on course. I think it's drifted off.
I agree with you. And we can substantiate this conclusion by looking a little bit more closely at this piece by Eric Larson. The piece itself is written with a somewhat restrained tone. It doesn't get nearly as vindictive and malicious as the numerous comments below it by the people who love the article. But if you look carefully at the piece by Eric Larson, there are some very disturbing things. And let me just quote just a couple lines here from Eric Larson's piece. He says, "Griffin's case for faked calls has been built on selective quotation interpretation and omission of evidence that contradicts and undermines it." So he's saying that Griffin has been cherry-picking his sources. That's selective quotation. And he's saying that Griffin is hiding, suppressing sources. He says omission of evidence. Griffin's second book on 9/11, the 9/11 Commission Report, Omissions and Distortions, detailed 115 lies of omission or distortion committed by the 9/11 Commission. So Griffin is well aware that omitting evidence is a lie. And here Eric Larson is saying that David has committed this omission of evidence in his work on the fake phone calls. He calls it a theory when, of course, it's just a hypothesis. A theory is a much more strongly developed and substantiated testing of many hypotheses. So his title of his article is erroneous, but then he's actually accusing Griffin of dishonesty and of lying.
Right.
And it slips by most readers. Some of the readers obviously liked it, and were thrilled about it, but it didn't slip by me. This is a scurrilous, defamatory attack, and it's totally wrong. And then the other thing I'll say here is I think that Kevin Larson's critique of it, which I've posted a link to, Kevin Larson's response to this piece by Eric Larson.
Ryan, right?
Kevin Ryan's response to this critique by Larson, which is the first one to go into it in any kind of detail. It quite effectively shows that this is not a convincing critique of Griffin's hypothesis. And of course, Griffin these people are demanding that Griffin respond, and he is planning to respond, so he will, of course, respond. The article itself is not what it purports to be, and I think that's important. And yet there was an excited response on the part of the commenters below, some of whom are other moderators at the site, praising the article, saying what excellent work it was, how detailed it was, how this is really going to force Griffin to recant, using words like recant. And this is another aspect that Blogger has gotten into. I mean, I guess we might as well just lay out a whole array of problems with this important site. Is the public demands on many threads at Blogger for public recantations of former positions by members of the 9/11 Truth Movement, and these are specifically directed at prominent members of the 9/11 Truth Movement, whom this majority clique at Blogger have criticisms of, and they're demanding frequently over several different issues that leaders of the movement whose views they disagree with publicly recant their positions. And it's just like this is not what the 9/11 Truth Movement should be spending its time doing, making public demands for recantation and things.
Well, that's a topic for a whole nother show,
sure it is.
Tod.
But it's Blogger that's doing it.
Yeah, what I keep coming back to is the importance of staying focused on the 3 building collapses, as a 9/11 Truth does. I think when we start wandering into these other areas like the Pentagon or the fake phone calls or any of these issues that I don't think we have our strongest case to make, we wander into dangerous turf. And we do have really good science and strong evidence on the collapses of those buildings. We have excellent physics work done by our physics team leaders. We have the Building What campaign. I just talked with a former board member. I'm on the board of directors for my condo association where I live, and this guy, respected individual. He's a former priest. And I was talking to him about 9/11 and Building 7, and he said, "What?" So here it is, almost 10 years later. He had never heard of the collapse of Building 7. So,
whose idea was the Building 7 campaign?
I believe it was David Griffin's.
That's correct.
I think there might have been some other people, that latched onto it, but I think it's a great campaign, and this is what we should be focusing our energy on: is how to reach out to people like my friend here, who still, even nearly 10 years later, was unaware that a 3rd building mysteriously collapsed on 9/11. I mean, there you go. And
made national TV with Fox News there.
That's right. Yeah. So.
So there's a lot of issues, and obviously there's plenty more complexities and issues and related issues that we could spend another hour on. And I didn't want to sidetrack our discussion from our focus today. So thank you for making that point. So now you say you don't think Blogger is a lost cause, but although you say at the same time that you're boycotting it. So what do you think is the appropriate way for us to go forward here as as members of the movement, but clearly not part of the ruling apparatus at 9/11 Blogger? How should we go forward with this problem we've got?
Well, upheavals like this issue with the Larson article and the dismissal or the placement on moderation of some of us is like a warning shot across the bow of 9/11 Truth. I mean, people are going to start looking at this and hopefully being introspective and seeing what they value about the Truth Movement as we get into year 10. We are up against enormous odds. The entities or the apparatus that was in place that made 9/11 happen, is safe to say, is still there and still functioning. And you look, if you want to see the effectiveness of any campaign, look at the fruits of the campaign. Look at the misery and the death that's been resulted from 9/11. You could even turn that gaze into our own movement. Look at the fruits of certain campaigns in our movement. Which campaigns have created divisiveness, and which campaigns have generated more support for us and more eagerness of the public to get involved in 9/11 truth or find out more about it. By your actions you shall be known, and I think it comes down to that. I think we have the word truth in our movement. I mean, what higher standard can you place on an activist movement? I've been an activist, as you say, since the 80s, and I have never seen a movement that is so thoroughly encompassing of so many great ideals and such a noble cause as the 9/11 Truth Movement. I think this is one of the key movements of the century, and we're trying to make government accountable. We're trying to make the truth a part of public policy. And if we allow ourselves to be sidetracked into discussions that are valuable but not integral to the main objective, then I think we start to lose our focus, and we open up the doorway for infiltrators to do their work. And as I said at the beginning of the show, you can rest assured that these people already had this game plan in place before 9/11 and activated it, and they're still working at it. We have so many proofs from so many different activist groups. My little story with the Rainbow Warrior, I mean, governments do this. They launch infiltration campaigns, and sometimes they end in death, and other times they end in the disruption or the disbandment of groups, and that way they succeed, and we can't let that happen. So what we are about is way too important. It has global significance.
So we need to vet our movement. We need to somehow make sure that the people that we're working with and sharing our intimate knowledge and understanding with that these people are genuine and as they appear. Yeah,
and I was talking to you at the beginning of the show about telling my little story from Hindu mythology. Can I run that by people now? Well, there's a great little story in Hindu mythology. I love Hindu mythology. There was a time in Brahmaloka, which is the Hindu version of heaven. Ishvara is the king of the gods, and he was away for a while, and he came back to Brahmaloka, and there were doubles of every single god. In the Hindu mythology, there are hundreds, maybe even thousands of gods. So there was a double of every one. The demons had attained magical power so that they could transform themselves into the gods, any god they wanted. So, Ishvara couldn't tell the difference. All the gods, they sounded alike, they behaved alike. Even his wife, he couldn't tell the real wife from the demon imposter. And so, being Ishvara, he devised a test to draw out the truth, the real people. And he prepared a banquet, and he invited everyone to the banquet. And he said, "Okay, I just have one thing about this banquet. I'm going to tie all your hands behind your backs." And they said, "Okay," because he's Ishvara, and you can't, he's the king of the gods, so you got to do what he says, right? So, so then they have to eat. So Ishvara just sat down and watched. And the real gods very carefully bent over into their plates and carefully picked up an item of food and fed their friends, who they knew were the real gods, this way, while the demon imposters just greedily smushed their faces in the food and made a mess of everything and just tried to feed themselves. So Ishvara said, there you go. Now I know who the real gods are. And that moment has arrived for our truth movement. We have to expand our view of ourselves as more than truth activists, but how we behave in the world and how we behave towards one another. And I think when we have someone like David Griffin, who's done so much for the movement, that the way to behave is with respect. And that's the main point I want to leave here today.
Well, I think that's a powerful point. I agree with you. I'm very impressed by your perspective there. I was impressed by your response, and it was so heartening, while trying to cope with this amazing series of what I would call quite vicious attacks on Griffin made in that thread, to have you jump in there and very courageously call these people on what they were doing and go straight to the point that this kind of behavior is unseemly and raises questions about who's involved. Like you said, by your actions shall you be judged. And if you look at the comments there, and judge them by that standard, you have to have suspicions that at least some of these people are not as they appear to be. And of course, we don't know who they might be, who's real and just has a seriously disturbed notion about how to contribute to the movement, and who's there intentionally trying to undermine the movement. But the comments were challenging Griffin's intentions. They were using the word intentionality when what that meant was that they're questioning his intentionality. That means they're raising questions whether or not he was an agent. He is an agent in the movement. There were suggestions that he had seeded his books with weak arguments so that they could be torn down and the movement destroyed because the books were so poor. And this wasn't just here and there. This was repeatedly, and in fact, these kind of comments were explicitly endorsed by one of the moderators at 9/11 Blogger.
It's the exact same thing that happened a year ago, almost to the day, with the two guys from AE 9/11 Truth calling the nanothermite paper scientists amateur investigators.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing, is to take down the leadership. And that's not to say that our leadership is above criticism. I think that there's a way to do that, and I don't think that way was adequately or certainly demonstrated in the highest sense of that word on 9/11 Blogger. And that's the issue that I have with it. That's why I say, I mean, there are a lot of good stories on 9/11 Blogger. I'm not going to trash the whole thing, throw the baby out with the bathwater. I think 9/11 Blogger needs a house cleaning, and they need an improved vetting system, and they got to start getting serious about that. Do I have a few more minutes?
You do. You've got about 5 more minutes. Yes, sir.
Okay, great. I have a lot of different careers. In this weird economy, I find myself doing a lot of different things. And I went back to school, got a degree in web development, and I'm designing websites for people to earn a living. And I saw on an advertisement that Stanford Research Institute was looking for webmaster help. And I looked through the qualifications, and it was actually something I could do. But then when I went to their employment page, they said, well, they're a defense contractor, so you have to go to the Department of State and go through their security questionnaire. So I said, oh, this is interesting. And, I went to the State Department and I looked at the questionnaire, and it is extensive. It is pages and pages and pages long. They want to know every affiliation, where, they have a list of groups that you cannot have belonged to. These are typical things like the Ku Klux Klan or militant Islamic groups, those kind of things. But there's more. And, government people put you through the meat grinder to find out who you are. And this is one of the tests they give to you. We don't do anything like that in the truth movement. We don't put people through that kind of scrutiny. I mean, we just, we're kind of good-natured people.
Yeah,
that's right. So we don't apply the same rigorous standard that the government applies to hiring somebody to do sensitive work. And so, because of that, we have vulnerabilities, and we are susceptible to infiltration. Therefore, the way to defeat it is to be vigilant, to be smart, to read books like Cognitive Infiltration, to listen to people that have had experience with this, like William Pepper. Really study it. And if you have questions, talk to these people. I called up William Pepper. You can actually get in touch with the guy and talk about that.
Sure.
Don't be afraid to do that. For anybody listening, don't be afraid to talk to anybody or ask anybody a question. Everybody's reachable in some way. And we are a truth movement, after all. So it behooves us to study very intently everything in our movement. So we have to become scholars. We have to know all the issues, and we also have to maintain a high level of behavior, I believe, because that's what the truth demands. You can't be a truth activist and lead a life that brooks dishonesty or other kinds of shabby behavior. It's just not going to work. If you're going to be a truth activist, then you better be a truth activist through and through, all the way to your very soul.
Beautifully said.
Okay.
Beautifully said. Well, I don't know how to improve upon your recommendations. I guess we'll give Blogger a chance to make this course correction that you're suggesting they're maybe considering. I won't call for a recantation of any past positions that people have taken, but it'd be nice if they would make sure that these kind of attacks on good scholars stop, don't happen again. That's my hope anyway. Well, we've got just a few seconds left, John, so I guess this is probably the best time for me to thank you so much for coming on and giving us your profound insights and your deep knowledge. Thanks so much, John.
Yeah, thank you, Todd. Keep up the good work. Thanks for airing all this. I think that's one of the hallmarks of our movement, is to openly discuss things like this. And when we have problems, put them out there and
exactly.
Let people decide.
We got to talk about the hard stuff. Yep.
Yeah.
Hey, John, thanks a million, man.
Okay, Todd, thank you.
Okay, bye.
All right, see you later.
Okay, everybody, that's it for today's show. Stay tuned to Resistance Radio, same time each night, and I'll talk to you next week.